4th, 2011. Dear Mr. Norman, here again are our 4 questions. In response to your dispute that they failed to request recorded information, following each of our original questions, I provide revised versions detailing what recorded information is requested, as requested, but which, of course, may not make the obvious questions any clearer than they already are. In response to your assertion the questions are unintelligible and unfocused, I further provide brief explanations of the intelligibility of each question directly beneath the original and revised forms of each, that it is reasonably incontestable that each are exceedingly focused and intelligible. Should further clarification of intelligibility or focus be required, particularly as you have raised no specific issue of non-intelligibility or lack of focus, I provide such substantial further explanation of the context and nature of this inquiry beneath our resubmission of the same questions, that particularly in this further explanation, little possible genuine reason could remain to contest either intelligibility, focus, or what kind of permitted material the questions indeed ask for. These indeed, then, are explicit formal requests for recorded information. I trust, therefore, that you will find that each intelligible question is faithfully provided as a request, not just for any obtuse or ambiguous recorded information, which veritable scrutiny might determine again to be evasive or inconclusive, but that each and every one of our freedom of information questions is submitted instead as an explicit request for the prevailing recorded information you have affirmed we indeed have rights to be supplied. That is, we are after the best answers the bank can provide, which best justify banking practice, if the bank indeed has made any genuine, veritable effort to justify its practice at all. You are certainly free to answer then, if true, that no such information has ever existed. But I think a decent respect for the opinions of your fellow man nonetheless would compel the bank to provide the best answers to these vital questions it can. Nonetheless, since you have raised a fact, your actual obligation under freedom of information only compels you to furnish recorded information, we, of course, leave it to you to raise the purported legitimacy of your bank to whatever extent and according to whatever strategy the bank and or yourself intend to pursue amidst a time obviously experiencing the ramifications of our questions. So I repeat the questions again, as I've said, explained I will, in revised form. 1. What lawful consideration do you claim the Bank of England gives up when it creates money? I've provided that same question in a revised form also. 1R. What lawful consideration or property of commensurable value equal to the money created, which is the principal, does the prevailing recorded information claim the Bank of England gives up when it creates money? Now obviously this question has huge implications. Because if the Bank of England cannot, as any other central bank could not, provide a just argument that it gives up lawful consideration, this means that all the debts of the world, in truth, are not owed to the banking systems which have claimed those debts. The ramifications of the answer, the only answer to this question, which we have already given, are stupendous. I go on with my response then, saying, to explain, this is a plain question related to worldwide practice of contract law, which therefore would relate to obfuscations of our promissory obligations imposed practically anywhere in the world. Which question plainly demands to know what thing of value the bank gives up to every purported debtor in the creation of money, not in purportedly loaning out already existing money otherwise, later claimed to be the property of the purported banking system. In other words, Mr. Norman, if the purported bank does not give up something in the creation of money which is commensurable to the debt it indeed claims it creates, there is no debt according to regularly recognized contract law, which principle we understand the bank nonetheless may claim to operate in authorized defiance of. 2 then, how then does the bank claim there is a debt to the bank? Of course the bank does claim there is a debt to the bank. I've provided the question in a revised form, 2R. What prevailing recorded information indicates how the bank claims or whether the bank claims? Of course, he can't possibly fail to satisfy that clause in any legitimate attempt to answer these questions, which, of course, I understand he's likely never going to do. We're not really truly writing this letter to the bank. We're writing this as a record of history to which the bank cannot respond and will not likely respond. What prevailing recorded information indicates how the bank claims or whether the bank claims debts to the bank exist in the creation of money in respect to producing further representations of our promissory obligations, and in respect, therefore, to the lawful consideration or property of commensurable value equal to the principal, the bank may or may not claim to give up in producing further representations of our promissory obligations, which in turn are to circulate as purported money. I then go on to explain the intelligibility of this question. How could any banker claim our original question is unintelligible? Does the bank claim a debt results to the bank in the bank's purported creation of money as a result of its obfuscation of our promissory obligation? Or does it not? Of course it does. The bank does not destroy or retire the payment of principal, never claiming the principal is the property of the bank, or thereafter somehow becomes the property of the bank. Does it? Indeed, the bank claims debts equal to the principal are owed the bank, but how so? For exactly what lawful consideration or giving up of original property of value equal to the principal created? And then repeat our third question, which was, what is the claim to interest then, when the bank can do no more than absorb the costs of merely publishing evidence of our promissory obligations to each other? I provide the same question now in revised form. What is the prevailing recorded information indicating and justifying explicitly what are the banking system's claims to interest then, particularly if the banking system has no actual material contribution to the creation of money in respect to our issuance of promissory obligation, then absorbing the negligible costs of merely publishing evidence or mere further representations of our promissory obligations to each other. I then explain these two forms of the same question. Possibly you simply presume it is unquestionable whether the banking system gives up lawful consideration commensurable with the debts it claims in its production or publication of mere further representations of our own promissory obligations. Quite possibly, you simply presume that the process of creating money or monetizing our production should be universally misunderstood somehow to naturally, legitimately, lawfully, or otherwise satisfy needs to clarify and to justify how your obfuscation of our promissory obligations can and should result somehow in actual debts to the purported bank. For this misunderstanding is certainly regular practice. It is likewise the common misunderstanding of dupes. Even as no submissive dupe can their self explain how their promissory obligation to pay principal from circulation can rightly be obfuscated instead to a purported debt to the purported banking system. But particularly owing to the ramifications of this process, and thus to our experience, how this obfuscation has multiplied falsified debt into terminal debt across the world, the question is not, therefore, unintelligible. In fact, on the contrary, the whole possibilities of vitality, justice, or inevitably terminal monetary failure hinge on this question. The question pertains to how, given whatever credibility of your possible claim that the bank gives up lawful consideration, you might claim interest is justified by property which is quite obviously, questionably, either the pre-existent justifiable property of the bank or a representation of the bank's possession. For certainly, either possibility is questionable when the purported money, or rather device, is